Okay, so I'm very happy to have Catharine with an A, two A's, MacIntosh back from Listed, the founder, president,
CEO.
brains behind, CEO. Um, and we were chatting the other day, and I thought, well, we really have to have you back.
Thank you.
And just because it was very much like I had another guest. Back after I had a couple of them, and I remember thinking to myself, they were kind of almost just here, was only 6 months, and then you realize how much happens in our business, and especially you being on the technology side.
Right, it's always changing.
And so, I said, okay, we're due for a catch up. We're due to have you back. And you said, well, what are we going to talk about? And the first thing that came to mind was this whole idea of whether the role of the buyer's agent is going to disappear. And I have debated it with my good friend, Natalka Falcomer.
Oh, love her.
I love her.
Smart woman.
Shout out. She's not listening. Well, if I put this on LinkedIn, she'll see it. Otherwise, she's not on social. I want to be her when I grow up.
Send it to her.
And she really thinks that they will go to they'll go into or thinks there's a better chance. But I remember, and my feeling when she said that to me was, and I'll be the first to say, like, I don't think that something makes sense, is when the cloud brokerages came about. And I remember going to a really good friend of mine who was a seasoned agent, and she said there's always going to be people who want that experience. It's the same thing as having robo-advisors instead of a financial advisor, this whole idea of like Wealthsimple or what's the other one, and saying, well, why would we have to pay all those fees? And I believe that there's people who want they don't want the experience with a person. Yes, I think there's people that want that relationship. And I've said a million times, I'm not a transactional agent. I'm a relationship agent. And so I work with the people who want that relationship on that side. But I think that goes for everything. And also, it's for most people, the biggest investment of your life. So to do that on your own, and by the way, there are people who can do it on their own. 100%. And those will be the people who will be like, no, I'm going to be the self-represented buyer, which we'll talk about.
Well, it's interesting here because there's the skill and judgment. There's the taking the information and translating it, right? Those people that need the advice because the information is just the information. So there's this idea about data and having access to the data and what it's going to do. And then with all the new changes coming with Tressa and whatnot, I think the real drive there is to support consumers with clarity. What does it mean? What's happening? Who is representing you?
Right.
Like you look up a listing online and you just think, oh, I've got some app or I found a listing. And I don't think consumers even realize that every single listing they look at that they find somewhere is connected to an agent.
Well, I also think, so I also remember when, I don't know if I'm assuming it was Rico that went like to the Supreme Court or something, trying to keep the sold prices out of the hands of the consumer. And I was an advocate for being against that.
Yeah, freedom of information.
Well, first of all, freedom of information. Second of all, if my only value is to tell you how much a house sold for, please fire me.
Yeah.
No, literally. So if and I, on some basis, I understand maybe that the RICO was trying to protect the industry, or in their sense of the word, they were trying to do that. But our value is, I think that the currency of our value has changed. And so we were just, as I said, I haven't even changed my sweater. I just did a film. I just filmed a podcast that everyone would have heard last week with Darren Slavens about Tressa. And I believe that it's going to cause confusion. I do. He thinks it's going to cause some clarity. Yeah. But it's my feeling about the confusion is just because I think there are bad agents who don't do a full job of explaining what the options are and managing expectations, and not to disparage anybody. And I think that that's where, one headline will not translate into actual fact. So.
Well, when someone shows up, and you have an agent saying, oh, before I can show you the house, before I can do this, I need to explain that there is this consumer guide that explains representation. And somebody not doing that, it's going to make it a lot more difficult to not be an actual registrant and show property and actually transact deals. And even having a seller agreement and talking about commission before, and it's what's led to all these lawsuits like in the States and here, before in your listing agreement, it was just we choose what I'm going to get paid, and part of that is what we offer as a cooperating commission. But now there has to be all these discussion with the seller of, oh, what if it's 5%? And we determine which part is going to the cooperating person, and then we have a self-represented person who comes and has the other half of the deal. What happens to the other portion for the cooperating commission?
So I think we're gonna debate it again, because I think it's a great. I'm coming from obviously the agent side of it. You're coming from the technology that is replacing a lot of the information that before that was available, people could access. And I will say this, there are people that do very well by trading their own stocks online. This is what they love. They look into it. They're very good at it. And I have no doubt, and I've met them, of people or investors that will buy their own places. They've got their lawyer. It's set up. Great. This is not about convincing that person that they cannot buy real estate.
No, I agree.
People can buy real estate. Yeah. The question is whether you want someone to do it for you. Like, I have a financial advisor that I absolutely trust and adore. I have no idea how he gets paid. He's told me. I have not listened. Because to me, I'm getting the value that I want and the trusted advice that I want. And whatever he gets paid, this is what he deserves. That's my own personal, and I don't want to do it. Right? I don't want to do it. I don't have time to do it. Okay. So as we all know, it's interesting, but you say 5%. So I never go to clients and say, they're like, well, what's the commission? I never say 5%. I've never sat in front of a listing, in a listing presentation, when they've asked how much it is and said it's 5%. I always start with, on the listing side, it is X. So on the listing side, it's 2.5%. I'm a full service agent. Yep. If someone has said to me, well, you know what? And believe me, I sold a condo a couple of years ago. He had done a stunning job on this house. Nothing had to be staged. I mean, he curated this house from top to bottom. From my standpoint, it was just like media. And so there are instances where, yes, you discount a rate but anyway, everybody has their own business model. And then I approach the buying side, because it's not 5% to me, and I decide what I get. That's my perspective.
And to be clear, there's no established commission. It is something that is negotiable with every
for sure,
agent.
But you're not the first person that I've ever heard say 5%, right? Yeah. So I recently had a listing where the seller said to me, well, does it have to be 2.5%? And I said, it doesn't. It doesn't. But what I always like to say is there is, I think the biggest challenge, and you mentioned the court case.
Yeah.
So who's the plaintiff? The plaintiff? Who's the person who sues? Plaintiff?
Yes.
Anyway, the person who's suing.
Yeah.
Clearly not a lawyer. Yeah. The person who's suing is a seller.
Yes.
Okay. He's not a buyer.
Yeah.
He's a seller. And he finds it unfair that he is being, in his words, forced to pay 2.5% to the cooperating, or what we call the cooperating, which is the buyer's agent. Yeah. And what I would say is I believe that is where the challenge ensues. Because as a seller, you see everything that your agent is doing. And by the way, most of the time, the buyer's agent is making more money than I am, because they're not putting out all the money that it costs to list a house and to market it and all that stuff. But that's fine. We all know that that's the way it works. But when I get a good agent on the other side, I know they've worked for it. I know that they have managed that client. They have made sure that they're going to close because they have the right. Yeah. They have the right mortgage professional. They have the right legal advice. That they've taken them out. They have educated them on the market. They have managed on their side. They, by the way, may have had 10 meetings just with the parents. I mean, I don't know, right? But they've earned that commission.
Yes.
They brought them in to be able to make sure that everything they've done up until this point has allowed their buyers to buy your house. It could be for more, it could be for less, I don't know.
Okay, now, so what's interesting there is, let's just say a good agent, a good buyer agent will have gone so deep, right? Whatever's required. And I think what's really interesting about these new rules is they're trying to bring clarity to the process. And then with this plaintiff seller, or in the case of this questioning of, do I pay the commission? When you have that same buyer agent and all of a sudden, with changed law and with certain listings, if all of a sudden a cooperating commission is not being offered, what happens to the buyer agent? So all of a sudden we're taking law and we're taking data and we're saying there's going to be different listings. Now we're looking at maybe there not being a cooperating commission. So now your conversation is very different with your buyer, because you're saying, in this case, when we look at this listing, you are going to pay me X% of the listing price. And that's in our buyer representation agreement. And I think where it's going to shake things up is we're going to have...
It's not going to happen. But I'm just saying so it's not going to happen because, and again, we were talking about this before we started filming, the other thing that sellers not forget, but I get it. You are in the ecosystem of the sellers. And I always say to sellers, it's hard. You're in that mindset. And I have this a lot where, like, even I come in and I'm like, okay, so I really recommend painting, or I really recommend having a handyman come in, or I really recommend all this stuff. And most of them are lovely and totally get it and understand. But I can see the kind of hesitation, like, oh, that's a lot, because you're in the mind frame to make money. You're selling, right? When you're buying, you're in the mind frame, I'm spending money. But when you're selling, you're in the mind frame of making money.
Yes.
So sellers are in that ecosystem, and I get it, and there's all emotions involved in selling, and they forget that there is the land transfer tax for the buyers. So it's not the buyers are like, forget it, I'm not paying that, like, I'm not paying my representative, because I'm sure the seller's like, well, they did the work for you, so why am I paying for that, right?
Yep.
But there has to be some give, or no one's going to buy your house.
Right, because they already have this huge fee. So
all of a sudden, by the way, the budget that they had to buy your house is now $50,000 less because they had to save it for land, for their extra whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, something's going to give.
Let's put this in the other perspective, where you have a really intelligent seller who understands, yes, actually, this seller should pay the commission, because just like you're going to say, let's stage it and let's have full service, the cooperating commission is an attractive portion of what's attracting a great agent to the house in some respects. So what about when the seller says, okay, out of the full percentage that we're paying, what if we offer 3.5 to the cooperating agent and we just do the listing side at 1.5?
Right.
I mean, is that going to start coming up? Well,
I've definitely seen listings offer an additional percentage to the cooperating if they have to sell fast. Right. So if you can get your client to come in and buy this and close before this date, you know, they're obviously going to save money because there's some kind of deadline for them, and, you know, they're willing to throw you some of that profit.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
No,
I don't like it, because at the end of the day, if that property was for your client, you should have showed it. Like, I just...
Period.
Period. Like, and I've said that to clients where, you know, by the way, I've also said it the other way. They're like, well, what if we reduce it? And I said, it's totally up to you. I will work in any capacity that you're asking me to work, well, to a certain extent. But I think that you also have to realize that, unfortunately, there are agents that'll be like, oh, I see 2%. I'm not coming. I think it's the same. I'm sorry. I hate to say it out loud, but it's the same situation. If you throwing, I'll give you an extra $1,000 or 0.5% more than we said we were going to give you originally because we need to close. Well, no. That effort should have been there. If that house worked for your client, you should have worked for the same amount of money. I don't love that. And I know there are agents, for sure. I've had to negotiate with an agent who had on a listing where, you know, my clients chose to put it at 2%, and I had the agent go, well, what do you expect? He's like, you're only paying 2%. And I'm like, you should be working just as hard. That's not No, they will say it. They're making less. They'll do less. No, it's okay. We'll move on. We'll look for something more. It's horrible. I mean, and going back to Tressa, I wish there were other things I could do to create more trust, but that is true.
I know one of the interesting things about Tressa is it actually makes multiple representation easier. People were asking if it got rid of it. No, it actually makes it easier because there's designated representation, and the clarity is trying to get away from this implied representation when there isn't an agreement in place. Right. So I think that most interesting thing for me as having a technology company is to basically say, if the law is about bringing greater clarity, how can the data, both for agents and for clients, make what's happening clearer so that the clarity of the law is actually supported in the data that you find? For example, if you just have an app or find a listing and you call the agent, right now, a lot of people just assume that is the listing agent. They don't have this idea that when you find somebody online, it might just be the presenting agent because they're ads that are basically out there, totally. Right? And so I think one of the things that's really great is that under the new laws, if you're at your own open house because your client is the seller, right, you can actually provide general information to the buyer who comes in because you're acting on behalf of your seller to get an offer to come. Right. So as long as you don't give skill or judgment or advice, right, you're just telling them something. But then I find it interesting that if you see that that's not the right house for them and they say, or even you want them to see the value of this house and you know that two doors down there's something else, you can't now go show it to them. No. Right? So it's very...
If they want to be self-represented, right? Yes. But it has to be said. That's the difference.
It has to be said. It's about disclosure.
Listen, I would also say on some level, it'll probably save some of the younger agents a lot of time, right? Because, there are people who don't understand how it works and they think this young kid's willing to show them a whole bunch of stuff.
And then take it seriously.
Don't take it seriously. Or they're like, oh, no, you know what? We're actually not ready to buy or, that type of thing. So I do think on some level that it will hold the public to, I think some people do not necessarily respect other people's time, but I think a lot of them just don't understand how it works.
There'll be value accountability.
Yeah. But I do think, so first of all, going back to like the apps and and the data that's come in, I think that is a big conversation around, what is that currency or value for the buyer agent? And will that just go out of, because you know what, listen, I've got listed. I know how much everything's sold for. I know how many times it's been on the market. I know all this stuff. I know average. There's ways of finding out, say it out loud, how Sigma had or has a value that they put out there. It's not right. It hasn't been right for a long time. And so I agree with you that there's definitely more understanding of value in the market than there ever was before. Yeah. But I'll tell you, it's nowhere near accurate based on people that I speak to. Like, oh, I heard or this, or I have this app or whatever. But the nuances of a home, just how we started this podcast, like things change. I've seen a shift in the market in the last 10 days.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yep.
So how is someone who is not entrenched in the business, entrenched in different markets, a market can change based on the products in the area? Yep. So...
And some of these other apps or some of the technology is, I think, leveraging or amplifying the lack of clarity that existed before Tressa to like cashback, for example, like there's like these cashback apps and various things that exist that are really dangerous because they're highly devaluing it, and those aren't going to be possible business models.
Talk about this is, as a number one conversation in Sales 101. As soon as you talk about price, you've lost. That's it. Value must be the beginning of your conversation. And I've had listing presentations with clients, and I've said, there are people that build their business on 1%. They do. They advertise it. 1%. All the power to them. There is enough business to go around for everybody who wants to work hard. All good with it. I welcome anybody to do well and I celebrate it. But I'm not that person. And I think that, I've heard someone was telling me like this is a trend with these younger agents that are getting into it and they're giving cash back to their buyers on, the back end. What are you doing for them? Like, what are you opening doors? Like, I really wonder. And by the way, I have discounted rates to get on a buyer side to get a deal done also when we're just at a stalemate. I would never want to see a client lose a deal because of commission that I'm going to make. There's no question.
Right.
Sell or buy, by the way. But I think that in any business, I mean, do lawyers discount their rates? No.
Well, what I think is really...
Do doctors in the U.S. discount their, like, I would love, and this is the conversation that always comes into my head. I'm like, okay, so they want to get rid of the buyers, or they want us not to work on commission. Maybe we'll be salaried employees. I love to see the quality of people that apply for those jobs.
Well, see, I
wouldn't want them.
I think it's so. I love this because I'm so worried that with the consumers not understanding what's going on, we could actually devolve the industry into something like that. Because listed, I mean, the whole point is that it supports an agent like you who is, I can be assured, a consumer going to get a good experience when they have a full service, value-oriented agent. And even you talking about the 1%ers and the young people, I don't want to say the name of the app out loud, but one of the biggest companies that is living and based on a cashback model is actually owned by Bridgemark.
Doesn't surprise me.
It's really interesting.
Well, because it makes more sense for them to commoditize it. I mean, I think that, and again, I think there's all sorts of models, like going back to the lawyers, like there's, as they call them, ambulance chasers, and then there's corporate lawyers, and then there's lawyers that work in there. And I think that you choose a lawyer based on what you're looking for. There's no question. Absolutely. Yeah. But to commoditize an entire, then I always think, I'm like, okay, so what if your buyer's agent, you paid by the hour? I'm like, right? I'm like, oh, I'd love to see how that works out for everybody, right? I mean, yeah. I think there's like, what's the model you're looking for? If you're like, I don't want to pay a buyer's commission, okay, so you're going to get only self-represented. Listen, I work very hard for my clients. I'm not willing to work for free. Who is? It's not a hobby. It's my career. So now you have people who want to be self-represented. Let me know how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no, really? I mean, I do this day in and day out, like for 13 years. Let me tell you, good luck.
Yeah. No, I love that we have an opportunity to utilize technology and clarity of the law to make sure that everyone understands what it is to be a self-represented party,
right,
and does not want it. Because they're not going to get value at the end of the day. And I don't think that's clear in the current model. I actually think the new laws are going to bring greater clarity, and we can utilize, like the technology of our company, for example. We already only attract full-service top agents from great brokerages.
Well, I think the reason is because first of all, like Realtor.ca is like a horrible experience and it's clunky and talk about like no visibility and no nothing. And I mean, I'm a realtor. I don't know how to use the app. I literally have no idea. Like I don't know how to use Realtor, but it's brutal. But I would say agents that want to have that collaborative experience with their buyers want a platform that they can look at together and have that experience.
Yeah. It starts with being connected. I mean, that is the one thing it does is these other apps don't keep you connected. Like with representation, you need to be in the conversation with that person. Just like an agent doesn't give advice and skill and knowledge and judgment to someone who's not their client.
Right.
When you are in an experience like an app, like you go on Realtor, you have the listing agent on every listing. So all your clients, if they're on there, are not getting you, so they're missing out.
Yeah, I mean, I totally.
I mean, they have you, but it would be nice if, well, because they have listed with you, you can be connected.
Yeah,
but-
I was gonna say I'm not a lead gen online client like agent anyway, so that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. Although there are other ones where it looks like someone else was the agent, so I think that will cause clarity for sure. But I would say
not even lead. It's not even lead gen though. It's basically everyone, even if you're not looking at buying, might just want to know what something costs. So having a safe place to look.
For sure. I just think that I think the point for me is that for an agent who is currency is more than this is how much the house sold.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is why I wanted clients to have the sale price, because the more they know, the easier it is for us to work together.
Yeah, it elevates the conversation.
Because if they are hearing the story about the house that sold down the street from their neighbor, I'm telling you, I'll put $1 million on the table right and tell you that price was wrong. Okay? And not because anyone was lying, just because broken telephone. And that's the way it used to be. Whereas now they look and they're like, oh, I saw it sold. I mean, a house that's a house next door to me sold for X amount of dollars. It doesn't matter how much it sold for. I will tell you, I'm right next door, and on paper, same house, I am not worth as much as theirs. And how does a seller, necessarily or a buyer, make right? Exactly. Yeah. There are so many differences. But not that it was a great house. But I think that's where, and I've been saying this for a while, and I think we've seen, a shift towards this. How many agents over the last 10 years have gone from just an agent to a full service agent? I mean, saying that I'm a full service agent is like almost redundant now, because really, when I first started, it was definitely special to be able to be doing all those things. But to say that like I clean my clients' houses before they move in, that I bring them all their packing supplies, that I'm pulling, survey reports for them, all the things that cost money, most agents weren't doing. But most good agents in the top percentage are doing it now because our currency is different.
Yeah, I love your idea of just value. I mean, there's no price comparison. You're willing to go to any length to give the service, which is the value, which is so great.
Because we do make a lot of money. I mean, that's the reality. We do. We are compensated well. But to just do it and collect the paycheck and not have, offer that client all the possible things that you can to make that experience so much better, whether it's going to book the elevator in the condo for them or getting the moving supply, like moving quotes or whatever that is, that's what our team does versus like, well, good luck with your home. I had a client, we just were almost ready to secure the house and they said, okay, well, maybe you can give us some of your names. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm like, you can call me 5 years from now. I'll still give you my number, like of the, the best painter I have or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think, listen, if I ruled the world, but like if I had a choice, I think I would reframe the conversation. I would reframe the plaintiff's, we'll call him a plaintiff, the guy who's suing, the seller who's suing, and say, I want value. I want the rules to change. I mean, I still can't believe that RICO allows like agents to put up pictures from their phone.
Right.
I mean, that's embarrassing. I've seen $2 million condos with pictures from their iPhone. I don't care how good pictures are on your iPhone.
One of the things I was
like, that's embarrassing. Shame.
One of the things I was reading that they want to have in the rules is just that you need to be available within a certain period of time.
Whatever.
And I thought,
if I'm not answering my phone at midnight, fire me.
Bar of, value. But I guess I would ask you, I mean, I think what is gonna happen to the buyer agent, and how can technology actually take this idea of value and really connect consumers to understanding how important it is to have the right agent?
I think, and I've seen the shift also, and just like my dear friend Joy Verde, who's
she's
amazing,
yeah,
said to me about the cloud brokerage. She said, a good agent never has to worry about it because the right buyer or seller is always going to want a good person representing. What's the old saying, like the the defendant that represents himself is like, I
Yeah,
don't remember.
It's like a doctor wouldn't operate on themselves even. Like it really. Yeah.
So, to me, I think that where's the call instead to have a higher bar for entry into getting your license? And that's not necessarily education. Like, I don't think all of a sudden we need to have master degrees or anything like that. But I think there needs to be, okay, so they went from 3 courses to 5 courses. That's just numbers, right? So where's the call for more, just more value in the process? Like, I just think that that's where, so I think the more technology, and I had Alex Ludek from Perch on the other day, and, I'm working with him on this great project where we can partner with them to create this kind of idea that, you meet with your financial advisor once a year, right? Yeah. See how your stocks are going, where you should move money, whatever. Well, do you meet with your agent? Because I was part of the biggest purchase of your life.
Exactly.
Most people. And so I should be sending you a value on your home based on and where it's going to go and where it's come from and that time from when you bought it. And so I'm working with them to put that. Does Perch replace me? No. But it enhances the value that I'm going to give to my clients as a great data company, right? Yeah. And it's the same I feel about listed is, that you're able to allow this collaboration with buyers to be able to, and sellers, sellers, there's no question. By the way, I think sellers should see as many homes as buyers. Like, you want to put a house on them? Let's go see what your competition is.
And even understand what's in their neighborhood, to understand the value of their own home and be having that discussion with you as their largest asset.
Exactly. So I don't believe that I'm sure Listed would love to become the number one buyer agent out there. There's no question. But I think your main goal is not to do that, but to work with realtors to create a better experience and more value. And that's where I think it's going. I just think that they're the guys that are just sticking their signs on the lawn or opening doors are not the ones that are going to last. And they haven't lasted. And that's why the stat is 85% of agents don't make it to year 5. That's a huge stat. I've said it. I think I just said it the other day in another. Like, it boggles my mind.
I think this is one of the biggest things that's misunderstood about technology. And even with the cloud brokerage, for example, the key word there was brokerage, because Listed cannot buy, cannot sell. We're not a brokerage. We actually recognized that the gap in the market was that consumers weren't understanding the incredible value of that relationship to a good agent, buyer or seller agent, representative. So we're filling the gap by making a tool that is unbiased, agnostic, and fully in support of consumers through a great agent, through organized real estate. Right. And I'm so excited about some of these changes, like even brokerage representation changing to designated representation. Yeah. Just the fact that multiple representation isn't going to happen by accident anymore because you just happen to be at the same brokerage but don't even know that other agent. Yeah. Like, now you're actually going to be able to have a conversation with your clients about what happens, who pays for what happens in a specific scenario. Yep. And I think it'll take agents that are really great and allow technology to show the value to consumers, because they're not going to just be able to have a door opener to go show them properties and whatnot, or even to sell something and save the money. They're going to have to see what's in that listing agreement in terms of what happens and what you're providing.
And by the way, if we could take land transfer tax or split land transfer tax, I would actually.
There's a good suggestion.
But by the way, I would love. There's no way. But I would love to see buyer's commission being paid by the buyers, because it would make that decision a much bigger decision.
Yeah, it would change so much in a positive way, and to just shift it that that it's part of it. I agree.
I think it's a great idea. The challenge is that, the city has just made it so impossible with the extra. So Does their budget go down now because they have to spend, $25,000, $50,000 in commission? So now they can't pay you X amount. They have to pay you less because they have to pay. I mean, something's got to give. And it's not the government building more houses. Anyway, that's for another episode. Thank you so much, Catherine, for joining me. Always such an amazing. And if you have not checked out Listed as an app, I highly recommend you using it, switching over, whatever it means, but download it today. And we'll actually put a link in the show notes for you to go right into the store and download it.
Absolutely. And they can't go wrong because they're connected, for example, to someone like you. And that makes it easy for them.
It's a great app. Yeah. I'm really so glad to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.